Welcome to today's Google Hangout. We got a great show for you. We have the editor-in-chief and the boss, Bobby Halton, on with us. I am broadcasting live from Montgomery County, Maryland's Training Academy with Captain Sam Villani. P.J. Norwood just signed on, and I'm going to let P.J. thank our sponsor and introduce our first guest, Tony, who wrote a phenomenal piece for fire engineering and fire rescue. P.J., I'll hand it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and hope everybody enjoyed their Christmas and their holiday season. And I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to spend with us. And Frank, I'm glad you made it to DC. I saw those pictures of that traffic. I'm sure your blood pressure is still a little high.
10 hours.
Yeah, Chief Halton, Merry Christmas. Glad you could join us, and Anthony as well. I'm sorry I was running a little bit late this afternoon, but I'm glad I made it. So today I'm a little unprepared. Just cleared up a kitchen fire, so I don't have all my paperwork in front of me. So we're going to introduce Anthony Correia today. He's going to talk about a piece that he wrote for fire engineering titled "The Oath." I'm going to let him give a short introduction of himself, where he's from, his experience, his history. Let him tell us a little bit about his piece, and then we're going to go from there as well. But of course, before we start with our guests, we always have to thank our sponsor, TenCate Fabrics. TenCate is an amazing resource for the fire service. They're an amazing company that protects us. They build the fabric for turnout gear that 8 out of 10 of us wear, regardless of what manufacturer of turnout gear that you wear. The chances are it's made from TenCate Fabrics. And the best thing about TenCate Fabrics is it's inherently fire-resistant materials. So they don't need to add anything to their materials to help keep us safe. The materials that they use, 8 out of 10 of us that we wear, regardless of what manufacturer, again, is inherently fire-resistant. We're extremely grateful for their sponsorship of this Google Hangout for this entire past year of 2017, and we look forward to continuing to build the relationships with them moving forward to 2018 and having them their support as our sponsor for this show the fourth Wednesday of every month, thankfully for Chief Halton and Fire Engineering of this Google Hangout. So to TenCate, we thank you, and we ask you to go to their website, check them out on Facebook, check them out on Twitter, and see what they have to offer for you. And maybe look into their station uniforms. Getting a little colder here in New England, and it may be time to put on some long sleeve uniform shirts. And TenCate Fabric is a great station line also. So check TenCate Fabrics out and thank them for sponsoring this show. So Anthony, welcome to the show. What do you have for us? Tell us about The Oath, and tell us a little bit about the piece that you wrote for us.
Well, it's truly a pleasure to be here. Thank God I made it this time as opposed to running around Bucks County trying to get on a few months ago. But The Oath really is about, I've been in the fire service 41 years. And when I first took my first oath back then, it was like, okay, it's just a process we go through. And we used to do it at a dinner. And so like, yeah, let's do this oath, get it over with. Drinks and the band come on. That's what we're really here for. And over 41 years, I've found that I was never more wrong back then, that the oath really is your entrance into the fire service, your entrance to that next level of officer by understanding the principles and values of the organization that you're professing that you're going to live by in that organization. So the oath needs to be a document that is related to your organization and that characterizes the values and principles and the mission of your specific organization. And when anybody takes that oath, they really have to understand the sanctity of it. My recommendation is that when you have your oath properly developed, that if you have a new candidate, you give it to them and say, take this oath home. Before you come in and actually get sworn in, I want you to write something on this oath. What is it? What does it mean to you? And we're going to review it when you come back in. And that way you can see if they really have an understanding of your organization or not. And then before they swear, they know. And then you put it in their personnel file to use it as part of your ongoing corrective action feedback loop for them. If it's an officer, then you need to have an understanding of what is that next level of responsibility that you're taking on that you aspire to. And it's not to be in charge of anything. It's actually when you come to a leader position, you're coming to empower others. That's your responsibility and job is to, so that should be part of it. You should change the oath for the leaders, the street leaders, the lieutenants, captains, and the chiefs that specific to their position. So it has, again, the values and characteristics you expect in that position. And it's something they should be able to hang on the wall behind them in their office or at home or wherever. So it's quick to look at, kind of like Chief Brunacini when he had his 5 principles of, customer service and how to be nice, something you can look at and go, oh yeah, you know what, I'm kind of not living up to that today, or you know what, maybe I need to brush up on how to be nice, or brush up on how to inspire others to do good.
I do agree with you, Anthony. It's one of those things that we, the oath, we get sworn in when we take the job, and then it's something that we get away from as the years go by. So I don't disagree on having something up as a reminder to remind us while we're truly here for those days that we do forget. But knowing Chief Hall and then knowing what he's done with a lot of his famous FDIC speeches, I was really interested to hear what he has to say about the oath and how it affects the fire service.
Well, I think that one of the things that are fascinating is how different organizations create things like oaths, commissioning ceremonies, appointment day activities that we do. And I think that what Tony's bringing to us today is a discussion, which is important, about what an oath really means, right? What is it? What is the purpose of it? What does it do in terms of creating a community, a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusiveness that I think is important when we're talking about an organization like a fire department or a rescue company or an EMS squad or law enforcement, right? What are the underlying principles, and oaths are fascinating because they are just the very word oath, right? What is an oath? And then it's not something that people commonly join in unless they're in the military or law enforcement or fire, right? It's when you make an oath to an organization like ours and a profession or a calling like ours, it's a different level of commitment, right? And if you like the Hebrew Bible, like I do, and you read, Saul, I think it's chapter 8, where he talks about the folks coming to him to have a king. He becomes upset because the folks already had an arrangement with him as the prophet because he could speak to God. So he gets all upset and goes to God, and God gets all upset, and they have this big conversation back and forth, like 2 Jewish moms arguing about the kids. And the point of the matter is that the oath that they had made 300 years earlier when Moses was up on top of Mount Sinai was a covenant. It was an oath that was binding. And what having a king meant is more about a social contract. So you talk about contracts and covenants. So an oath is kind of like a covenant, right? It's kind of like it goes beyond the rules and regulations and showing up on time and the craft, if you will. And an oath is something that's much more I don't know, spiritual in a way, which is an interesting conversation to have, right? And in an age of secularism and the growing movement away from things that are spiritual. For me, it works. And I think that as technology becomes more and more prevalent in everything we do, and more dispassionate, if you will, philosophy and things like oaths and understanding things where values and virtue and constructs like that come from become all that more important. If we're really going to understand technology and the modern complex environment, we're going to have to talk more about philosophical things like oaths in ways that are meaningful and understandable, if that makes sense. I don't know. Sorry.
Bobby really hit it in saying that it captures the spirit of the organization. That's what an oath really does, is capture a spirit. So when you're writing it, what is the spirit of your organization and your position? I think that would help when you start putting it together and when you explain it. This document explains the spirit of our organization, if you wanted to use one word. And by the way, Bobby's FDI speech about ethics, I think was 2011, was one of the inspirations for this article.
Well, before I go to Frank, just want to read the definition of oath. I just looked up here. It is piquing my interest a little bit more. It's a solemn promise, a solemn process, often invoking a divine witness regarding one's future action or behavior. And that kind of goes to what Chief Walton was saying. So I thought that was quite interesting to look up the actual definition. Frank?
Great minds think alike, because when you talk about oaths, you got to talk about what the word meant when the oath came out for America. And it comes from our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And in the words of Noah Webster, who was a famous made the dictionary, but also went to school at Yale. When he published the dictionary in 1828, the oath meant this, and I'm going to have Sam Villani read it for us, of what the oath meant in the time of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Go ahead.
A solemn affirmation or declaration made with an appeal to God for the truth of what is affirmed. The appeal to God in an oath implies that the person appreciates his vengeance and renounces his favor for the declaration is false. Or if the declaration is a promise, the person invokes the vengeance of God if he should fail to fulfill it. A false oath is called perjury.
So this was one of the founding principles of our republic. And I always think it's funny that firefighters, when they swear an oath, often swear an oath to the Constitution to protect and defend the Constitution. But yet a lot of us don't go the extra thing to even understand what we're swearing an oath to. So if you're going to swear an oath to it, you should at least know what's in it. Does that make sense? Truly. And to show the importance of this is that Congress' first law in America that was signed by George Washington was actually about the timeliness of delivering oaths. So I think that we got to realize that even as the country, unfortunately, moves away from religion, we have to realize that there is something, as a firefighter, as every firefighter in America, we're swearing an oath to something higher than ourselves. And I think that that selflessness is what makes firefighters firefighters. I'll pass it to Bobby Halton on that note.
Well, and great research, and very important. Obviously, an oath means that you're admitting something or agreeing to something or invoking a higher power, right? Whether it's the universe, whether it's your conception of God, or as our founding fathers would say, nature's God and the God of nature, which encompasses all faiths, beliefs in God or gods, right? The God of nature. So, which is really important, and that was a big part of our founding. What's also interesting to remember is that that is part of that covenant, right? And our nation was founded on a covenant. There were two nations that were founded on covenants. One was Israel and Moses back way back, and the other is America. And it was not so much in our Constitution, but in our Declaration of Independence. We found all men to be created equal and endowed by their Creator, right? That's a covenant with the natural rights, right? Endowed by your Creator with a set of natural rights. Well, one of those natural rights is to affirm something and a firm set of principles, which oaths do. And to Anthony's point earlier, Anthony talked about, and I asked my great friend Deanna Ali, that's who just joined us, and Deanna, thank you. We're going to bring her on in a minute. She's hangout bombing. I asked her to come sit in with us because she's another great thinker, and this is a great conversation. But what Anthony was talking about is that there's an initial oath you take to the principles of the industry or the institution or the profession or the organization, right? Whether it's the United States of America when we pledge our allegiance, whether it's the fire service when we do our initial oath of commitment or our induction oath, right? Where we say we're going to do that. But then what Anthony brought out, which I think is really important, is that as we go through the system and you move through the system and assume different roles, it is necessary to reaffirm that commitment and to reaffirm your commitment to those additional responsibilities, right? So if you look at my boy, for example, with the United States Navy, as a basic recruit, when he first joined the Navy, he took an oath, and then it's to defend the Constitution and the nation, right, and to serve. And then that oath is the foundation. But then when he became an ensign, there was that. When he became a first lieutenant, there was that. When he became a lieutenant commander, there's that. And every time they do that in those organizations, you reaffirm and accept that added responsibility as part of your oath, which I thought was a great corollary. And maybe as we go through the fire service, one of the things to come up with, which might be neat, would be a document, if you will, or a series of documents. Where Rick Lasky and I are currently working on a book called Customs and Courtesies for the American Fire Service, which is just basically about tradition and ceremony, which I think is critically important. It's a lot of what we're talking about today, where you could take each level in your system. And so when someone gets promoted to, say, engineer or company officer or shift commander or whatever it is in your system, they could then reaffirm and then pledge to accept those additional responsibilities. And I think it's really important, because failing to do that, there's no recognition, right? There's no affirmation. And unless something changes, nothing changes.
Anthony?
One of the things too with the oath is it's not like you just stand up and you take it today and it's done. There needs to be a continuing follow-up by all of us to make sure that we're meeting that standard, that we're holding that standard. In the station, when the guys or gals, there's something going on, it's not going right, we need to go, you're not holding to the sanctity of the oath. Do you know how important? Maybe I need to bring this out to you to read this again, because you're not living by the oath of the fire service. You're not living by the oath of emergency services to do the job that you just swore to last year or the year or 5 years ago to do. And, if you can't do it, maybe this isn't the place for you anymore. But we need to always hold that standard. It's kind of like some places you get a physical, you come in, and that's it for the rest of your career. That's a whole different argument. But the point is, we need to hold that standard. We need to remind people that there's that standard all the time. I came up with and I hate acronyms, but I came up with an acronym. It's called HEART. The fire service got to have heart. It's you're honorable, you're ethical, you're accountable, you're responsible and trustworthy, and then I add an I for integrity. So you got to be able to look in the mirror every day when you come to work. Do I have heart? And am I going to fill out the oath with my heart every day? And I think if we do that, we're going to go somewhere. And it's time to reinforce some of those good traditions. Not all traditions are bad, and the oath is a great tradition. We just need to update it with the times.
Let's bring on our new guest. I apologize, I didn't catch your name, but welcome to our Google Hangout, sponsored by Tincata Fabrics. We're honored to have you on. If you can introduce yourself and weigh into the conversation, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Try again.
Dina, we're not hearing you. Check your settings, Dina. You might be muted.
This is going to go to our second segment about radio communications. A lot of talking, not a lot of communicating on the fire ground.
This is my dear friend Dina Ali from Raleigh, North Carolina. She's a captain and a great writer, great thinker, but obviously technologically impaired. Check your settings. You may have on your computer. You may not have your speakers enabled, Dina. Sometimes I push that little button and I always forget. Try that one. That's what I always do. We'll come back to you. Play with your computer.
You got the training officer right next to you. Here's the gentleman that needs to deal with the oath every day and make sure that not his instructors, not just the students, his instructors are reinforcing that oath, that they're living the oath and practicing the oath. They're demonstrating the oath to the new recruits.
You want to speak to that, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was thinking earlier when we started talking about taking the oath, how I didn't have to retake an oath to take this position, but I'm, as a recruit training coordinator, my responsibility has significantly changed. I'm not only counted on by the operations, everything outside of operations is in support of operations. So here at the training academy, I want to ensure that all 79 of my recruits that we have in right now, we have 2 recruit classes running concurrently, and we have to make sure that the product that goes out into the field is well trained, has heart with the eye, very important there, Chief. 100% important. And if they don't, we have to tell them this isn't for you. And those have been the most difficult choices I've had to make since I've been here. And my decisions are based on, you know, very objective requirements and the support of our chief officers. My leadership here, I have a battalion chief and an assistant chief and a division chief who I'm very on a daily basis interactive with. And you know, they want to make sure we're putting out a good product. We're putting people in the firehouse that have the base, the core foundation for which the firehouse is built upon with these folks. So, you know, we're not giving people jobs these days. We're trying to really preach to them. This is not a job. This is a calling. This is a career, and it can be a 30-year career if you choose. At very minimum, 20-year career. And, you know, we try to get them looking forward, because I can remember back in recruit school 18 years and some change ago for me, I was day to day. I didn't have that forward thought, or that, you know, I couldn't look forward. But we're trying to instill that in them, because I think that it constantly reaffirms their need to keep their nose clean off duty, and B, to develop the skills that they don't have that are going to enable them to keep the oath.
Amen.
PJ, you want to weigh in on this?
I want to see if we have Dina, if she's unmuted herself and back up and running. Dina, can you hear us?
I don't see her on yet, so.
You know, Anthony brought up an interesting thing while we're waiting for Dina again, too. And I think I just throw this out really quick. I think that one of the first things we need to do if we're going to really encourage learning, or we're going to really encourage community, is that we have to understand that you got to reject what the common sense view of people's actions are, right? People always believe, most firefighters believe, that what other people did in a situation is because of a common understanding of what they think are the facts, right? Or the situation. Nothing could be further from the truth. How people behave in the world is how they think the world actually is, right? How they relate to it, what their education, what their training, what their worldview are, what their moral, ethical stuff is, their experiences. So where I think oaths are a bit different than when we talk about enforcing normative behavior, which is kind of some of the other stuff we were talking about in regards to how it measures up to the oath. We have to, there's tremendous moral hazard there, right? In other words, everyone's worldview is what it is, and there's a million things that go into it. And we always assume that people see the world or the behavior the way we do. And nothing could be further from the truth. It doesn't mean they still don't believe spiritually, intellectually, morally, that they're charging right down the right path, when they could actually be doing something which in our worldview is horribly destructive. And I'm just going to throw an example out real quickly, which is kind of concrete to what is going on in the fire service right now. Part of our oath, if you will, is to continually innovate, evolve, expand our knowledge and our expertise, so that we can do a better job and I think customers are part of our contract. I think our fellow citizens are part of our oath, right? That's a covenant. That's an oath. They're fellow citizens. They're not customers at that point. Like when you run up to a burning home and it's empty, that's a contract fire. No one should get hurt, no unnecessary risk. It's just property. If there's people trapped inside, that's turned into a covenant fire. We're going to go, excuse the expression, but to the wall. We're going to put ourselves, to quote the movie guy, in extreme risk. We're going to put ourselves in peril to save those people. I believe that. Now, there are people who are in the fire service who do not believe that, and that's fine. That's their worldview, and they could be living up to their expectation of the oath absolutely fine by not going that next step, right? And I think it's where a lot of people conflate what's going on with the science of fire behavior these days, is that they don't talk about the context. They just talk about what's best or most efficient or whatever, forgetting that there's always a context, right? There's always a nuance to every situation, so that there is no one size fits all. And yeah, and I'm just going to, not to be disrespectful to anything that's going on, but yeah, we could just find helicopters with giant Bambi buckets that drop 10,000 gallons and an explosive charge and blow off the roof and drop in the water and put every damn fire out. But that, although it would be the safest method, except for the poor helicopter pilot, that would be the safest method. The reality is it would suck, right? It would get in the way of success. And oftentimes rules and regulations and bureaucracy get in the way of people innovating and creating and making success. We do that. We build these stupid, so when we're talking about oaths, be careful not to conflate that with rules and normative behavior and confuse it with people's worldview, because that's a really, man, that'd be some fun stuff to, get inside your boots and see how that feels, right? That's like when you're going duck hunting and your waders are too short, and you start living like the duck. So it's a whole nother realm of experience. And anyway, sorry.
I thought that was very well said. P.J.?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always love the commentary. I truly love when Chief Walton joins us, because he brings such a a straight, direct, down-to-earth meaning behind. We try to make so much more out of this. And it's actually
Donald Trump. Is that where you're going with this? Are you trumping me?
No, I don't want to offend anybody here today.
I'm going to get on Twitter and call you a bad name.
But it's a great lead into our next conversation on communications, because I think that's where the backbone of all this lies is our lack of ability, or our failing ability, to actually communicate with people because of social media. But before we get into communications, I just also want to mention about the halfway point. Don't forget the hashtag FETalk to join the conversation. So we're watching that hashtag on Twitter right now. So if you want to join in the conversation, or add to the conversation, or ask a question to anybody here today, use that hashtag FETalk. And also, I just want to make a mention of Tenkata Fabrics again. For those of you unfamiliar with Tenkata, they started serving the fire department in 1969. The first fire department they served was the Cleveland, Ohio Fire Department, and building fabrics for their department. Again, inherently fire-resistant fabrics. And one other key that I like, and this goes back to something Chief Walton was just talking about, is they're made in USA. It's American-made, American workers, all right here on the American soil. There you go, Chief.
Okay, one other thing real quick. Well, before I attack my friend Bill Carey, who just sent me a funny note, who I absolutely love. If you don't know Bill Carey, he runs Firefighter Nation. He works with us with Urban Firefighter. He's an absolutely brilliant guy, firefighter out of your neck of the woods, up there in Montgomery County area. Just a brilliant guy, great dad, absolutely beautiful human being. And I'm going to get to you in a moment, Mr. Carey. But to PJ's point, Tenkata Fabrics, really important thing is going to be happening in, oh my goodness, I'm so old. I apologize. End of January, beginning of February, down in Orlando, Florida. The IAFF is holding, I think it's the Nick Mullane. Frank, it's the affiliates workshop, right? Is that what's going on?
Yes, I believe so. And because you got a portrait of Ronald Reagan, you're just not getting old. You're invoking Reagan. I just don't recall.
Oh, okay, I don't recall. I'm taking yeah, right. Now I sound like Andy McCarthy in front of the Congress. I don't recall. Anyway, so back to the point. The IAFF on the 28th and maybe the 28th and 29th are holding the Mullane affiliates deal. If you're going to be attending that, please stay an extra day. Or if you want to come attend something really good, Tenkata Fabrics is helping put together a PPE symposium down there. and I will be attending. Tenkata has been kind enough to invite myself and Eric Roden and I and Chris McClune will all be there, looking at what's going on with PPE. And again, Tenkata Fabrics, you know how they started out? They were making sails for the Dutch Navy. That's how they became a company. How cool is that, right? And like over 400 years ago, and the Dutch sucked as sailors anyway. They were like running into the ground all the time. They
had great sails.
I'm just kidding. The Dutch are great sailors, for God's sakes. And they had great sails. But our good friends from Tenkata, who are probably one of the neatest companies to deal with, and they've got a great leadership team, incredible product. And as PJ said, 8 out of 10 of us are wearing their stuff. And with everything that's going on with PPE today, and all the questions that are being asked about PFOAs and PFOSs, it's a great, and cleaning and how all that works. This is one of the companies that says, like, man, they're an open book. They'll tell you exactly what they know right now, what's going on, what they used in the past, what they're using now. And so as we go down that road, my thanks to them. And also we have a supplement coming out in fire engineering this month, January, which should be in a couple of days. I lied. See, you caught me in another lie. In January, about how clean is your gear. And Jeff Scull was kind enough to write it for us, along with Jeff Burgess and many, many other people. So a great supplement, fantastic read on how clean is clean. And I think we finally have the one and only, my dear friend from Raleigh, North Carolina, Captain Deanna Ali.
Does it work?
Yeah, we can hear you. Speak up, though, soldier.
Apparently I was supposed to shut my computer down and restart it, and that's how you fix things. So did you tell them how I got drawn into this conversation, what we were talking about to get me here?
Nope, tell them.
Well, apparently I'm an idiot for reading Harry Potter. And I was explaining to Chief Halton how relevant Harry Potter is to our profession and the way we treat each other. And he told me to bomb your Google group talk.
So elaborate a little bit more. Your speaker is going in and out.
I think my internet actually might be going in and out.
You got to be hardwired for communication. Just like, you got to kind of be right there in the zone.
All right, I'm close now. How's it sound?
That sounds better. Go ahead.
No, we were just talking about Harry Potter and how relevant Harry Potter is to the fire service, and apparently it relates to this talk of oaths. So I Google bombed you guys.
Well, kind of give us the synopsis of how that relates. I've never read Harry Potter, but I'm sure a lot of our viewers have. So,
what does he have to do when he reads the first book and he goes to the school? What's the first thing they make him do? There's the what oath.
Right, and then you get sorted into your house based on your values.
Right, it's the sorcerer's oath. The whole damn book is predicated on an oath, for God's sakes.
So that determines if you go to an engine or a truck.
He went to a broom. The guy went to a broom crew.
Dalton doesn't tell you that he refuses to read any of Harry Potter once he heard about the Sorcerer's Stone.
I read the whole damn series, for goodness sakes. Yes, I did.
Wait, said I was an idiot for reading it?
I'll read anything people send me.
Keep that in mind.
That's scary.
So back to the oaths. Did we lose? We lose Anthony? Anthony disappeared. He's only trying to use the restroom.
Let's move a little bit to communications. And we're going to ask you to mute your computer because we're getting a lot of feedback through your feed. And next time you bomb us, which you're welcome to come on, you got to get a hard line because just like in the fire service, and we're going to introduce Sam here, is that we have a lot of talking going on and not a lot of communication. And sometimes you got to get into the weeds of communication to understand the impact and how to use your equipment. And to just give you one quick example of something we just had in New Haven, and I was ignorant to the fact as well, is we had 3 houses on fire and the 4th one was getting exposed. So when the deputy chief gave their size up, it was a little bit longer than the normal size up. And I didn't realize it, and either did the chief of ops or other individuals. It must have been the PowerPoint slide we were missing. But after 60 seconds, if you key the mic, it automatically cuts you off. So if you could start by speaking to that, and then we'll move on and we'll get PJ and Anthony and everybody back involved in this.
Yeah, sure. my present assignment, I'm here at the training academy, but one of my second disciplines is I'm a communications specialist. I'm an all hazards communications unit leader, rostered with obviously with our agency here in Montgomery County, but also with the state of Maryland. And I was on our FEMA Urban Search and Rescue team for 8 years. Didn't like the camping so much, so I stuck with we have a communications interoperability group here in Montgomery County. So I like to speak on communications. Everybody, every firefighter, EMT, police officer, we're all radio nerds because we like listening in. We all have, if you don't have your portable at your house, if you're not issued a portable at work, you're listening on your scanner app. We all do it. So there's a communications nerd inside everybody. Speaking to the timeout, the 60-second timeout, you think about a firefighter that becomes injured, trapped, incapacitated, and their PTT button gets stuck on, or you're going down the road, getting dressed, and your mic brushes up against the side of gets pinned up against the side of the door for 60 seconds. It allows your radio to time out so people can get airtime. And if you're in a Mayday situation, it's going to allow maybe somebody to ask you where you are if you can't get your lunar out or something like that. And also, if you're on the way to a run and your mic's stuck open, it's not going to stay open for the whole, for the entirety of the incident until you figure out you have an open mic. And, it might save some people who get into less than professional conversations in the rig when they have an open mic. I'm sure we all have those stories. I can tell you there was one in Montgomery County here down in Tacoma Park way before my time, where the company officer gave one of the chief officers what's to do, and the chief officer was standing on the front ramp of the firehouse as they were pulling in. So we certainly that timeout feature is also, it's programmable. So some agencies may decide not to enable it. Motorola, for example, they have a CPS, a programming software where you can go in and adjust that. Just like you can adjust your bass volume. There's a lot of adjustments in the technology these days that if it's done correctly and if people are trained properly on it, it can really aid us in communicating on the fire.
Without a doubt, but you got to make sure that your personnel know that. So if your department chose, because a lot of departments we're a city urban department,
yeah,
and we didn't know that. So I'm sure that you get somebody in that radio room saying, well, I think it should be 40 seconds instead of 60 seconds. That's the question that if you don't know it and you're listening, call one of your chiefs, call somebody from communications and say, how long does it take for our radios to time out? Because I would guarantee, we were in a room of people that, read fire engineering, read fire rescue. We're pretty up on what's going on. I had no clue of that. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that didn't know that you can set your radio to individual different components. Anthony, were you aware of that?
No, not at all. That's the first I heard of it. And it's important stuff, because when we get new radios or we get new technology, sometimes we talk about it, but we really don't train on it. So it's a great point. We should not only make sure people understand and how it fits into policy, but actually go out and train on the radios in the training ground, just so you know how it works, so you get the feel of it. Just the repeater button. It takes me still today. Sometimes I try to talk over the repeater noise that comes in because I didn't train on it initially.
PJ, you want to weigh in on that?
I go back to 4 channels on a radio.
Or 2,
I would like to weigh in as having some recent experience. So, Sam, we just moved over to new Motorola portables. We had Kenwoods in service as our portables that we had in service for 22 years.
Man.
We got way longer than we should have, but that's a whole nother conversation. But we just put the portables into service, and being the training officer for the department, it was kind of my responsibility to make sure that I learned as much as I could about these portables up front during the programming stage. And I was very impressed and very surprised on how much you can actually do with the portable radio through programming up front, and how important it is to know not how your radio works, but also how the system works that you're accessing. Because a portable radio is just one piece of the system. Yeah. When we put our portables in service 21 years ago, it was handed to me. I slung it on a leather strap, and I knew how to use it. I knew how to change channels. I knew how to change the volume. I knew how to change the battery. And that was pretty much the extent of it. I had very little knowledge of our actual system and of the actual components of the radio. But being in the current position that I'm in with these new radios, it was very eye-opening to me to learn how my system actually works, how we access that system, the strengths, and also the weaknesses of the system. And then I tapped on some other good Penwell and Fire Engineering authors to assist me in the training. I put a very concise PowerPoint training program together. I brought every member of the department, both career and volunteer, through a classroom session teaching them about the portables and all the functions and how they work in our system. But the piece that I was still missing was the ability to actually allow them to practice using the portables during training. So I leaned on two of our authors of 25 to Survive, and they have an excellent drill that sounds, when you hear it, sounds kind of, you get the typical eye roll from the firefighters. What the hell are you making us do? Because I actually went to the dollar store and I bought Legos. And I assembled the Legos out on the table, and I separated the teams of firefighters. Put one at the table with this pile of Legos, and with portable radio. I put the other firefighter outside into another room with structural firefighting gloves on, some with their SCBAs on, and they had to provide the instructions to the other firefighter to build the Lego. But what I also did was
that's cool.
created instructions. I rewrote the instructions for the Legos, so they had to change frequencies between each step. So not only did they have to change frequencies, but now I had firefighters, they all started on a different channel, but now they were crossing channels. So now I had competing radio traffic. They had to have some radio discipline. They had to be clear, concise, and short with their transmissions. So the 25 to Survive book from Penwell Fire Engineering proved very valuable, because that's where I drew that drill out of. And the first time, a couple times I'm introducing it in the training room, the guys are, what are you doing to us? We're playing with Legos. You can only imagine all the stuff that I heard. But then at the end of the day, there was a lot of smiles. There was a lot of laughs. A couple of the crews actually realized if they transmit an urgent message, that everybody else would shut up so they could build their step of their Lego. So for those of you that are listening that are inputting new communications or want to look at your current communications, take a look at 25 to Survive. That was a great drill that really paid off for us.
P.J., on something that you said, another thing that we got on our portables now that I really like is when you change the channel, it says verbally over the radio what channel you're on, which has been a tremendous feature. I just used it at a 2-alarm fire the other night where I wasn't sure what channel I was on when I got on the third floor, and I just switched it back and said channel 2. I'm like, okay, I'm good to go. So can you speak to that? Because a lot of people don't understand that you can program that feature in your radio either.
Yeah, actually, we used you can use a stock voice. We actually had a gentleman, firefighter Mark Nelson, who's one of our communications specialists here in Montgomery County. It's his voice on our radio system. So when you change it, you hear Mark's reassuring voice. And he also happens to be one of our SISM guys, and he's a very reassuring, calm guy. Musician, probably would have been like a radio DJ had he not fallen in love with fire service. So it's neat. Every time you switch it, you hear his voice, you get a little chuckle. But yeah, the technology is nice, and it's like anything else. Knowledge is power. So if you know about it, you train with it, you become confident with it. You might not be able to get 10,000 reps in, so everything's second nature. But certainly, one of my biggest things, my May 2017 fire engineering article on treating your radio like your SCBA. If you have SCBA confidence drills, like PJ was talking about, he actually, Chief Norwood actually had the folks combine some SCBA stuff with some communication stuff. And, if you're checking your rig in the morning, you're checking your SCBA and everything else, that major piece of technology that's in the front seat of your rig has to be checked the same way.
Now, something I learned when I took your class at FDIC a couple of years ago was that a dirty radio actually impacts the ability of the radio to communicate. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and actually, so there are certain radios that are still out there that they're intrinsically safe, but they have vulnerabilities. And over time, even with a rubber boot, you can get dust, debris built up between your electrical connections. And what we found was it was getting in the antenna wells of our portable radios, which Motorola has since addressed and remedied. They've flush mounted their antenna connection, so stuff can't get in. But before, their radio, the way their radio was molded and to act, I guess probably engineered to add a little extra rigidity to the antenna, the antenna was screwed into the portable. Well, stuff was getting in there, and we found a dirty radio was up to 30% less effective. And we were using a very simple signal strength indicator to show that. And you know, that's the whole thing. It's like you don't put a dirty SCBA on your back in the morning after the fellas had a nice run overnight. You don't want to operate with a dirty portable. It could potentially fail you. And even if it doesn't have that vulnerability, there's some other vulnerability that it's where the dust, dirt, debris, if you don't maintain it over time, will get in and affect the radio for sure.
And with any technology, it's real important that you test. You know, we have a lot of members who say, why do we do the morning radio test now? And it turns out that just 6 months ago, Lieutenant Justin McCarthy found a problem with all of our brand new mics.
Yeah.
They were actually canceling each other out. And some of us saw it and we thought it was because the battery connection was dirty. So we took our batteries out, and we put it back in, and we couldn't duplicate it. But Justin stayed on it as a lieutenant and fought, took a couple months, and got Motorola to listen. And it turned out Justin McCarthy was 100% right, and Motorola replaced every mic in the city. So those radio tests are important because technology is prone to failure. So that's why you always got to rely on that line firefighter. Chief Halton, can you speak to that?
Yeah, a couple of interesting things. Radios, like computers, home computers, we tend to use very little of its capability, right? Most folks use their computers, their home computers, as a word processor and nothing else. So, which is fine. But if you really want to get the most out of your radio, you have to do exactly what PJ spoke about earlier. You need to look at the manufacturer, get a good rep to come in, give you some good training, go through all the features, and then you gotta become familiar with those features through drills like Dan Shaw and Doug Mitchell lined out, the Traditions training guys in their 25 to Survive, and they also post their Sunday Preach, where they talk about that drill. They put it in their Sunday Preach on fireengineering.com if you want to find the drill that PJ was talking about. But Dan and Doug, because when you do that, as PJ said, oh, you find out what the emergency traffic buttons, what you can do with that. Oh, you find out the talk around deal. So in other words, there may be conversations that just the crew wants to have that you don't need to share with the entire fire ground, and how to do that seamlessly with gloved hands, in context, under pressure, you know, is a big deal, right? So training and drill and training and drill and training and drill. And I know people get sick of hearing it, but it's the bread of life for us. It really is. It's the most important thing we could possibly do. And technology, unfortunately, as Frank pointed out, if you read books like, in 1981, the Sentinel book was Charles Perrault's Normal Accidents, right? People think that technology is making the world safer, when actually it's making it far more dangerous because it creates more and more paths to failure, right? So when you have a robust radio system, much like Frank was just talking about, that comes with just one minor inherent flaw in a very complex system that was only caught a few times and was difficult to replicate. But imagine that problem occurring during a Mayday, or during a building evacuation, or during or during an active shooter situation where the shooter is mobile. That's a fatal. Now it's a fatal flaw in that system. And albeit with all the most respect to Motorola and Ericsson and all the other great folks that create radios, technology is what technology is. What's so interesting about today's technology is that, and why, to go full circle in our discussion about philosophy and technology, that we need to really have good philosophy, like why do we drill and train, and why do we have activities like the drill that PJ was talking about, because no one really understands it, right? Technology is so complex that nobody really understands how the X's and O's and all the radio channels and frequencies and trunking, and now we're going to broadband and FirstNet, and Verizon is competing with FirstNet and AT&T. All that's important to watch and follow, because what's best may not be what's most readily apparent or what's most readily available. And so as we go down that rabbit hole, and we got some great questions from the folks out in the street. I don't know if you want to take a look at those, Anthony and Frank, while I'm babbling incoherently, and Dina. I mean, the technology question, that's a whole nother show. How do we deal with technology, whether it's radios, thermal imagers, improved SCBAs, whether, all of it, better braking systems on trucks? How do we how do we integrate all that? How's it going to happen into the future? But the radio issue, you know, and again, this conversation has gone full circle. We were talking about some stuff off camera in the beginning. Language is one of the most complex things in the world, language, and managing it and on the fire ground with limited resources, time pressures, conflicting goals is a fascinating process, and which is why I don't believe that the first due should ever assume command in most robust systems. Now, there is a time when they should, but I think 99.9% of the time, the first due arriving officer assuming command is incredibly stupid. And that's a whole nother discussion. And stupid in the sense that we just know better today, right? We're taking it off a construct that came back from the day when one person had a radio, or maybe there were no radios, or the radio was very limited and restricted. Now our communication capability being so much more robust, immediate, and available, I think it's time to look at that construct again and look at some of the other innovations going on. That's another conversation for another day, but I would throw out how the technology has impacted that philosophy of, oh no, you gotta have that first due person assume command. They're probably the person in the worst possible position to do anything of the sort. But that's another conversation for another day. I think these questions were fascinating. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in on that. And I think we have.
PJ, you want to take some of these questions?
Yeah,
we can always go a little long too, PJ.
I got you, Chief. I'm going to take this first question. I'm going to post it to Anthony, and then have Dina get her input also. So the question is, what core parts go into creating an oath?
I'm going to go with what I actually have in the article. The oath has to be for your organization. The oath for the Rotary is not the oath for the fire department, and the oath for Montgomery Fire Department is not the oath for Hartford or somebody else. So the oath should be specific to your organization and your community. It needs to be written by your organization and with your people involved. It should be created based on your mission and values of the organization. And as Bobby brought in, I didn't add the word, but new one is spirit. Feel that spirit of the organization, the mission and the values should be built into that document. The meaning and intent should be clearly understood. So you might need another companion document that explains it. But as I said earlier, that maybe the explanation is having each recruit or new officer actually write what it means to them. And at the end, as I got this from Colonel Keskill, I just want to read this real quickly. An oath is a solemn appeal to God and witness the truth of statement of the sincerity of the promise, coupled with the imprecation of divine judgment in the event of falsehood or breach of obligation. The sincere and unyielding sanctity of the oath must be regularly reiterated. I said that earlier. It needs to be reiterated. It needs to be acknowledged every time before it is administered, so those about to understand, take and understand the implication of failing to honor it. What we didn't talk about earlier is, for the last one, as well as you need to understand the importance of it, you need to understand failure to live by the oath. When you don't live by the oath, it's a significant failure by you and maybe even your organization.
Dina, one of the other questions that was posted by a listener is our thoughts as far as revisiting the oath on a time increment base. So when we get hired and 20 years go by and you don't revisit that core oath, that core mission, do you think it's a good idea that we look at that on, say, a 5-year period and revisiting that oath each and every 5 years of our careers?
Oh, absolutely. Can you hear me? I switched over to a hard mic.
Yep, we got it.
Awesome.
So no, I really agree. I actually grabbed our oath and when I made captain, when I got promoted, and it is so outdated. It just says, live by the laws and the ordinance. And so it's so vague and outdated. It's something that you kind of just glance over. And I was looking, a friend of mine just got promoted and he created a list of expectations and he included the big 4. Do your job, treat people right, give all out effort, display an all in attitude. And those are 4 really easy things to remember and 4 really important things. So you guys really got me thinking on how important it is to create an oath that's not outdated and that can actually relate to what you're doing and who you are, and something that you can think about and put to use each day. So in that case, it'd be important to revisit it annually, talk about it, live by it.
I think that's a great point, Dina. For those of you attending FDIC this coming year, Mark Von Eppen, who's also a great lecturer, is one of those that really preaches those big four. He does a great job and has a great classroom at FDIC every year. So for those listening that are interested in getting more information on that big four, he's one of the instructors you want to see at FDIC this year. Frank, Sam?
Sam, you want to delve into another communication issue? We still got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, what were you saying? Something about FirstNet?
Yeah, well, I heard Bobby talking about it, so explain to what FirstNet is and what's going on.
Yeah, so as of yesterday, FirstNet is a nationwide program that's aimed at basically enabling interoperability nationwide. And certainly in some of our larger metro areas, we don't have that much of an issue with it because we've come a long way with regards to the technology. We have the resources for it. But, you know, you go 100 miles outside of any major metropolitan area, and I guarantee you're going to find critical communications issues that this FirstNet is going to address. As of yesterday, 47 states and the District of Columbia opted into it. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not on a committee for FirstNet. I just think it's a cool thing. I think that technology is going to be huge. God forbid we have another major incident on the scale of 9/11 or a war that ends up on our soil. FirstNet will enable us to certainly mitigate that better as first responders.
Explain a little bit about what it actually is.
You will be able to, once FirstNet is completely built out, press your transmit button in Maryland and talk to somebody in California. But more importantly, a specialty team from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Let's say it's from my hometown, Ocean City. Shout out to Ocean City Volunteer Fire Company, my folks down there.
There you go.
Let's say their specialty dive team, for example, is needed out in Deep Creek Lake in Garrett County in Western Maryland. They're not going to have to worry about getting issued a radio or switching to an 8-tack or this or that. They'll know exactly where to tune to on their radio because they'll have that in their radio. Maryland, the state of Maryland actually has a Maryland First network, which is a 700 megahertz system, which it basically takes the edict of interoperability that FirstNet is taking nationwide, and it's actually online here in the state. So we already have that capability. You think about your medevacs for the state of Maryland, it's the troopers. The troopers aren't going to have individual radios for individual jurisdictions. They just one radio, and they know where to tune to talk to each jurisdiction. So the beauty is that interoperability goes from being something that you have to carry in a box to something that you already have, you're already armed with when the tones drop.
I think that's going to be very useful, and it's also useful. We kind of get that myopic view that we're only dealing with the fire department, but we just had an active shooter where 2 officers were shot in New Haven, and when all the alphabet soup came, the FBI, the ATF, state police, they all needed to be on their radio. So we were able to issue them Stocksbox radios. And now this would prevent that, and we'd be able to allow them to use their own radio.
Absolutely.
So I think we're definitely going to have to kick the tires and work out the kinks, but it seems like a step in the right direction. We're kind of at the witching hour. We'd like to thank Tincata Fabrics. Remember, they're not like that specific brand for every particular piece of PPE that you have, whether you have Globe, Morning Pride, Intertech, or the host of others. So it's kind of like an independent resource that when you're speccing gear, call Tincata Fabrics, get their rep on the line, and they can walk you through. And it's kind of like an unbiased opinion. But I found them to be very helpful, not only at their booth at FDIC, but also on their website and when you call and just have a question. And I know that we talked about some of the features of Motorola today and banged them up, but I do have to give them some credit from a firefighter safety point of view, is that when we did raise an issue, we didn't go through years of bureaucracy. We got it fixed fairly quick after it went through our local distributor. So I was very impressed with how responsive they were to New Haven after Justin uncovered the issue. So I'm going to leave it to Bobby Halton to sign us off. And again, thanks to Tincata Fabrics, P.J. Norwood, all our guests, Tony, Deanna, and Fire Engineering. Go ahead, Bob.
Hey, well, there was a lot of conversation here today. We talked about oath. Thank you, Anthony, for bringing that up. Please read Anthony's article. It's up and available, and I know Anthony will be tweeting it out right after this. So if you don't follow Anthony, probably a good thing to do. Please, follow Sam, follow PJ and Frank and Dina. It's a good way to help keep the community alive and vibrant. A lot of stuff to talk about there. A lot of things to meet out and in terms of commitment and oath and principles, and how do we keep the community of firefighters connected with one another in more meaningful ways, which I think is really important. The whole idea of technology and radios and what's going on with FirstNet, very complicated, intricate kind of situation, and there's some significant questions to talk about. In other words, proprietary activities, the accessibility to it, and competition and issues like that. And I think that's important. I think they're all very virtuous and good people that are involved in it, and on all sides of the equation. And all those discussions are important, right? I hate big monolithic monsters like Google and people like that. I think they're very, very dangerous. I think they can dominate and own the conversation, and that's a problem. And no disrespect to Google, who enabled us to do this today, but I think they should be broken up. And the other thing I would say is that we always have to be careful about one point of failure, right? In other words, gigantic, robust things are interesting. And remember that the second law of thermodynamics, when we talk about entropy, right? And if you think about it, complexity was first unraveled when in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when they came up with the three laws of thermodynamics. And the second law talks about energy and dissipation, right? And when we talk about entropy, eventually there's so much energy inside of these giant bureaucracy systems that they collapse under their own weight, right? And it's why Kurt Vonnegut wrote Ice 9, right? The world's going to freeze rather than erupt in energy. It was a big physics joke, and all the people in the physics world thought it was hysterical. But when you think about it, it's fascinating when we talk about big systems like this, right? Like having the whole nation interconnected in one gigantic system, which is fascinating. Is it the new grid? How do we underwrite that? What are the safety measures? How do we manage that? I mean, there's going to be some really great conversation down the road. And I think the way to encourage it to be even better is to bring in more players, right? More opportunity for more people to get inside the network, and the network's going to be what the network's going to be. And I think it's neat. But do your homework on it and pay attention to it, and pay attention and really talk to Frank, because there's a boatload of politics involved there, a boatload. And I don't want to get into that. That's not my wheelhouse. I agree with the definition of politics, which is a Greek word, poly meaning many, and ticks are tiny blood-sucking parasites. So I am a Washingtonian. It's my own political party. If you want to join, I've started a party called Washingtonianism, where we have no political party, we have no agenda, we have no dues, we have no organization. It actually doesn't exist, but if you join it, you're with me. We're in a world of our own, where I find myself 90% of the time, which is a very comfortable place to be. I very rarely disagree with myself. So I disagree with that. The Hangout, and thank you, Dina, for joining us, is a place where if you've got something to say, like Tony did, or I know Dina always has great thoughts, please reach out to the other hosts. We love to have guests on with great ideas, and we're always looking for people that want to share their opinions. We're talking about taking this to a new realm where we might be taking the radio shows and moving them to Hangouts on a daily basis, because I think they resonate more when people can see people. We're looking into doing that, and as we go down the road, so keep those thoughts in the back of your head. If maybe it doesn't just have to be on the hump day. Maybe it can be on the bump day. I don't even know if that exists. We can make it up. Now it does. Fridays is bump day. So just make shit up. I've made a career out of it. So, I think there's some really neat conversation. I'd like to see it continue, right? Like I think Anthony, Tony, maybe you're collaborating with Dina and PJ and Frank and Sam. Maybe some model language, maybe some thoughts about what should be in your language. And then how do we, maybe for the various ranks as we go through the system. And then Sam, if you want to be a point of contact for how FirstNet is going out or how it's happening with you. I think that's some important stuff we need to be talking about. And FirstNet will be presenting at FDIC. They've got a classroom. The actual FirstNet folks are going to be there, some really good people. A really great buddy of mine from the Phoenix Fire Department, Mike Worrell, who works for FirstNet. He'll be one of the people putting that together. And FirstNet will be, talking at our technology summit. FDIC is coming up. It's a small gathering in Indiana, a very casual, very tight group of people. So if you want to come to that, we strongly encourage you to go register. Go to FDIC.com, and Frank will be there, Sam will be there, Dean will be there, Anthony will be there, and we'll be talking about everything from the Grateful Dead to nozzles. So, honest to God, we have classrooms that go from the Grateful Dead to your nozzle. So, and there's something there for everybody, right? I mean, that's how incredibly varied that crazy show is. And it's just an absolute blast to be a minor part of it. And, for 91 years, it's been where the fire service goes, right? It's a tradition, and nobody owns it. Not Penwell, not me, not the people on the board. The fire service owns it, truly owns it. Anybody can speak there. You go through a process, you put in your application. So you get to hear the many varied voices of the fire service, and many of us disagree with each other, and that's fine. That's why they make chocolate and vanilla. Shit, some people are stupid. They eat strawberry in ice cream. Can you imagine that? Strawberry. But anyway, my wife eats pistachio, which is an anathema. I don't understand it. Oh God, Rocky Road. Okay, I'll give you Rocky Road, because that's just like junk inside ice cream, which kind of works. But and chocolate, no. Okay, now it's getting crazy on the side.
You're digressing.
I digress. But anyway, the IC is coming up. Please check out the supplement in January. How clean is your gear? Please, let us know how we're doing. If you're going to be down at the IAFF summit and the Mullane Summit, I'll see you there. I'll be visiting there. I'm going to be out with the FDSOA in 2 weeks in Phoenix. We're going to be having the Fire Department Safety Officers group, where I'm going to be doing a class, my new class called Safety Tyranny to Safety Differently. It's a brand new program. I've never given it before, so it's probably going to be a colossal failure. So come watch me crash and burn in Phoenix, which won't be the first time. Other than that, I can't tell you how happy I am and grateful to Frank and PJ and all my friends for what they do for fire engineering and doing this show. Frank is the bravest man I've ever met, and I say that with absolutely no compulsion or hesitation. And that's not only me who believes it. Charles Krauthammer has called him that, one of the bravest men that Charles Krauthammer's ever met, which is pretty high praise. So thank you to all of them. Thank you to all of you for supporting fire engineering and everything we do, and fire rescue and Firefighter Nation and all the great things that the Penwell Fire Group puts out. Thank you for doing that. As we get near the end of the year, I'm so grateful to so many people. I could go on for 3 days. It's your fire service, and my friend Tommy Brennan would be so proud, because we have taken it back. We're taking it back with these hangouts and the podcasts and the articles and the new way the fire rescue is laid out now with the trusted voices of the fire service. We're taking it back. We took Tommy's advice. He told us, 15 years ago, or no, almost 20 years ago now, it's your fire service, take it back. Well, we've taken it back. It's our fire service. The Fire Act grant was unanimously reapproved, and under the current leadership of the firehouse, the sunset clause was extended out to 2024, something we couldn't get done for the last 10 years. We got done in the first year with the group we have in there now. So God bless them, and thank them for doing that. Be kind to each other, take each other well, be good. Somebody once said that, treat each other with kindness, because you never know what somebody else is going through or has been through. Respect each other's worldviews. Doesn't mean you have to hide yours, but respect one another's. Today on the call, we have a Catholic who's married to a Presbyterian, who's hanging out with my best friend who's a Muslim, and one of my best, and it's all good, and it's all great. And as long as we remember, we have a contract to do work, and we have a covenant to save people. And Those two things are very different, but they operate at the same time, and they're part of the yin and yang of people. They're part of the light and the dark side of life. Thomas Paine said it best: society reflects our wants, and government our wickedness. And that's really, really important stuff. So, hey, we hope this was enlightening. We apologize if we rambled on incoherently, which I tend to do. We love you all very much. We hope that 2018, we hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, whatever else you happen to, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate, Tree Day, I don't care, God bless you. But seriously, we hope it was beautiful, and we hope it continues to be beautiful. We hope you have a beautiful, absolutely beautiful 2018. We hope all of you are well. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take us off, Shannon, please.